The penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan had 73 rooms, but Victoria Ashford only lived in 3 of them. Her bedroom, her home office, and the hallway between, that narrow corridor where she could move from sleep to work without acknowledging that anything else existed, especially not the pink bedroom at the end of the east wing, especially not the 5-year-old girl who sat in that room day after day, staring out the window at a world she refused to speak to. Victoria's assistant had left the schedule on her desk, color-coded and precise. 7:45 board call with Singapore, 9:15 conference with the legal team about the merger, 11:30 lunch meeting with the governor, 2 o'clock site inspection at the new development downtown, 4:30 interview candidates for household staff, 6 o'clock return home to sign documents Margaret would leave on the dining room table. Nowhere on that schedule was there time marked for daughter. That was intentional. Victoria Ashford was 42 years old and controlled a real estate empire worth $3.7 billion. She'd built it from nothing. Well, not quite nothing. She'd built it from grief and fury and the desperate need to outrun a memory that chased her through every quiet moment. 5 years ago, she'd had a different life. A wife who sang in the shower, a daughter who laughed so hard she snorted, a brownstone in Lincoln Park that felt like home instead of a mausoleum. Then Isabel died. The cancer came fast, 8 weeks from diagnosis to burial, and when they lowered Isabel's casket into the ground, their daughter Emma stopped talking, just stopped, as if her voice had been buried too. Victoria tried. God knows she tried. She took Emma to Northwestern's top pediatric psychologist. Dr. Chen had diplomas covering an entire wall and charged $400 an hour. Selective mutism triggered by trauma, she'd said, her voice gentle and clinical. With therapy and time, she should recover. But Emma didn't recover. Victoria flew her to the Mayo Clinic. They ran tests, brain scans, hearing tests, neurological assessments. Everything came back normal. There's nothing physically wrong, the specialist said. This is psychological. She needs stability, routine, and emotional support. Victoria provided all of that. She hired the best child therapists in Chicago. She enrolled Emma in a private school with a counselor on staff. She bought every book on childhood trauma and selective mutism, stacked them on her nightstand, told herself she'd read them when things slowed down at work. Things never slowed down at work. By year 2, Victoria had seen 14 different specialists. By year 3, she'd spent over $500,000 on treatments. By year 4, she'd stopped counting. And by year 5, she'd stopped hoping. Emma was 7 years old now and hadn't spoken a word since she was 2. She communicated through nods and head shakes, through drawings she'd slide under Victoria's office door, through the way she'd touch her mother's hand when she needed something. But her voice, that was gone, buried with Isabel. And Victoria had learned to accept it, learned to build walls around the pain, learned to pour everything, all her energy, all her focus, all the love she didn't know how to give anymore, into steel and concrete and buildings that couldn't disappoint her. The penthouse reflected that. Glass and marble and clean lines. No photographs on the walls, no clutter, no warmth, just expensive emptiness and the echo of footsteps on hardwood floors. Victoria stood at her office window that Tuesday morning in October, watching the sun rise over the lake, and felt nothing. That was the worst part. Not the grief anymore, just the absence of everything else. Her phone buzzed. Margaret, the head housekeeper. Ms. Ashford, we need to discuss the new hire. Victoria glanced at her watch. 7:30. The day was already behind schedule. I have 15 minutes before my first call. Make it quick. The surveillance system. Victoria didn't trust anyone. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. In the 3 years since she'd fully retreated into work, she'd hired and fired 11 different nannies for Emma. The first one had seemed perfect. Warm, experienced, came with glowing references. Victoria paid her $90,000 a year plus room and board. 3 months in, she found the woman selling photos of Emma to tabloids. grief-stricken billionaire's silent daughter, exclusive photos inside their tragic life. Victoria fired her on the spot and increased security. The second nanny lasted 6 months before Victoria discovered she was stealing not money but worse, jewelry that had belonged to Isabel, Victoria's wedding ring which she'd stopped wearing but kept in a drawer, Isabel's grandmother's pearls. The woman claimed she was borrowing them, but Victoria saw it for what it was, theft of the only pieces of her wife she had left. After that came a parade of failures. One nanny was negligent, letting Emma wander the building alone while she talked on the phone. Another tried to cure Emma's mutism through harsh discipline, taking away her drawing supplies, refusing to let her eat until she spoke. Victoria found out when Emma drew a picture of herself crying with a woman's angry face looming over her. Then there was the nanny who got drunk on duty, the one who invited her boyfriend to stay over in the guest room, the one who posted videos on social media of life in a billionaire's home, the one who fed Emma nothing but fast food for 2 weeks straight because the kid wouldn't tell me what she wanted. By the time Victoria fired the 11th nanny, something inside her had hardened completely. She installed cameras everywhere, 18 high-definition cameras throughout the penthouse, monitored 24/7 by a security company. Every room Emma entered was recorded. Every interaction with staff was documented. Victoria had a live feed on her laptop, her phone, her tablet. She could check in anytime, anywhere. At first, she'd told herself it was for Emma's safety, protection against the next person who might try to exploit them, hurt them, steal from them. But somewhere along the way, the cameras became something else, a way to be present without actually being present, a way to watch her daughter's life from a distance, through screens, without having to feel the full weight of what she'd lost. Every night, Victoria would come home, eat the dinner Margaret left covered on the stove, then retire to her office. She'd open her laptop and scroll through the day's footage. Watch Emma sitting at the breakfast table, pushing cereal around her bowl. Watch her in the playroom, drawing. Watch her in the library, reading. Watch her in her bedroom, sitting by the window, staring out at the city. Silent, always silent. Victoria told herself she was monitoring, supervising, making sure Emma was safe. But really she was hiding behind technology, hiding behind work, hiding from the little girl who looked more like Isabel every single day and reminded Victoria of everything she'd failed to protect. The cameras had become her prison and her comfort. As long as she could watch, she didn't have to engage. As long as she could see Emma was physically okay, she didn't have to ask herself the harder questions, like whether her daughter was dying inside, just like she was. Margaret knocked on the office door, interrupting Victoria's thoughts. The housekeeper was 63, gray-haired, efficient, and one of the few people Victoria actually trusted. She'd been with the family since Emma was born, had loved Isabel, and treated Emma with a grandmother's gentleness. "The agency sent over the new candidate's file," Margaret said, handing Victoria a folder. "She's here for the interview at 4:30. Victoria flipped it open. Rosa Delgado, age 71, born in Guadalajara, Mexico, U.S. citizen for 42 years, widowed, 3 adult children, 7 grandchildren, previously worked as a live-in caregiver for an elderly couple on the North Shore. Before that, 20 years as a hospice nurse. No criminal record. References attached." Victoria frowned. "She's 71. "Yes, ma'am. That's too old. Emma needs someone who can keep up with her." "With respect, Ms. Ashford, Emma doesn't run around much. She sits, she draws, she reads. What she needs is someone with patience." Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. "And Rosa has that. I spoke with her references myself. Everyone says she's kind, reliable, and wonderful with children." Victoria studied the photo clipped to the file. Rosa Delgado had a round face, warm brown eyes, and smile lines that suggested a life lived differently than Victoria's. She looked like someone's grandmother, like someone who baked cookies and told stories and didn't have a cruel bone in her body, which meant she was probably too soft, too gentle, not equipped for a child as damaged as Emma. "Fine," Victoria said, closing the folder. "4:30. But if I don't like her, we keep looking." "Understood," Margaret said, and left. Victoria returned to her screens, to the safe distance of surveillance, to the life she'd built, cold, controlled, and completely alone. The humble caregiver arrives. Rosa Delgado arrived at 4:28, 2 minutes early. Margaret showed her into Victoria's home office, a room of dark wood and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, with windows overlooking the lake. Victoria didn't stand, didn't smile, just gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Sit." Rosa sat, her hands folded in her lap. She wore a simple navy dress and comfortable shoes, no jewelry except a small gold cross on a chain. Her posture was straight but not stiff, calm, present. "You've read the job description," Victoria said. It wasn't a question. "Live-in position. You'd have your own room and bathroom on the 3rd floor. Salary is $75,000 a year plus full benefits. Your primary responsibility is my daughter Emma. She's 7. She doesn't speak." Rosa nodded slowly. "The agency mentioned that." "It's not a phase. It's not shyness. She hasn't spoken a word in 5 years. Victoria's voice was flat, clinical. "Every specialist we've seen says there's nothing physically wrong. It's psychological. Trauma-induced selective mutism following her other mother's death." "I'm very sorry for your loss," Rosa said softly. Victoria didn't acknowledge that. "Emma goes to school Monday through Friday, 8 to 3. You'd prepare her breakfast, pack her lunch, make sure she's ready for the driver to take her. After school, you'd supervise homework, activities, dinner. Bedtime is 8:30. I work late most nights, so you'd be responsible for her evening routine." "Of course. There are cameras throughout the house," Victoria continued. "They record everything. I review the footage regularly. If I see anything I don't like, any negligence, any boundary crossing, anything at all, you're terminated immediately. Understood?" "I understand." "Emma doesn't speak, but she understands everything. She's highly intelligent. She communicates through drawings, gestures, and occasionally writing if she needs something specific. Do not try to force her to talk. Do not bribe her, punish her, or pressure her in any way. Multiple therapists have tried. It doesn't work." Rosa met Victoria's eyes. "I wouldn't dream of forcing a child to do anything." "Good." Victoria stood. "Let me be clear about something, Ms. Delgado. My daughter has been through 11 caregivers in 3 years. Most of them seemed wonderful in the interview. Several came from prestigious agencies with perfect references, and every single one of them disappointed us, some spectacularly. I don't expect you to be different. I expect you to follow the rules, do your job, and not get attached. This is a professional arrangement, nothing more." Rosa stood too, and for the first time, something shifted in her expression. Not anger, not defensiveness, just a quiet sadness. "Ms. Ashford," she said gently, "I've cared for many people in my life. Sick people, dying people, children who'd lost their parents, parents who'd lost their children, and I learned something important. You can't separate the professional from the human. Not really. Not if you're going to do the work right." Victoria's jaw tightened. "Then maybe you're not right for this position." "Maybe," Rosa agreed, "but let me meet Emma first. Let her decide." That was unexpected. Victoria blinked. "She's 7. She's still a person. If she's uncomfortable with me, you'll know. Children always tell you the truth, even when they can't speak." Victoria wanted to refuse, wanted to dismiss this woman who dared to suggest that a child should have agency in her own care. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the calm certainty in Rosa's voice. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the fact that she'd already wasted an hour of her day on this interview and didn't want to start over. "Fine," she said. "Margaret will take you to Emma's room. 5 minutes. Then you leave." Rosa smiled softly. "Thank you." Emma's bedroom was at the end of the east wing. A large room decorated in soft pinks and whites, with a canopy bed, built-in bookshelves, and a window seat overlooking the lake. The room was beautiful. It was also untouched, like a museum display. The toys were neatly arranged, the books were alphabetized. Everything was perfect, and Emma sat by the window, curled up in the seat, staring out at the water. She didn't turn when Margaret opened the door. "Emma, sweetheart," Margaret said gently, "someone's here to meet you. This is Ms. Rosa." Emma didn't move. Rosa stepped into the room slowly, giving the child space. She didn't rush forward, didn't crouch down with forced cheer like so many others had. She simply stood near the door and looked around. "What a beautiful room," she said softly. "You can see the whole lake from here." Emma's shoulders tensed slightly, listening. Rosa walked over to the bookshelf, scanning the titles. "Oh, you like Charlotte's Web. That's one of my favorites. I used to read it to my daughter when she was your age." She touched the spine gently. "Do you have a favorite character?" Emma finally turned her head, just slightly. Her eyes, Isabel's eyes, Victoria's eyes, watched Rosa carefully. Rosa smiled, not a big, performative smile, just a small, genuine one. "It's okay if you don't want to tell me. I understand." She walked over to the window seat, but didn't sit, didn't invade Emma's space. Instead, she looked out at the lake, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. "You know," Rosa said quietly, "when my husband died, I stopped talking for a while too. Not forever, just for a little while, because it felt like if I talked, I'd have to pretend everything was okay, and nothing was okay." Emma's eyes fixed on Rosa's face now, really looking. "So I understand," Rosa continued. "Sometimes words don't work. Sometimes they just make things worse. Sometimes silence is the only language that makes sense." Emma blinked. Her hands unclenched slightly. Rosa finally looked down at her. "If you ever want to talk, or not talk, or just sit together and be quiet, I'd like that, but only if you want. Okay?" Emma stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded, just once, but it was something. Rosa smiled again. "Thank you, Emma. It was nice to meet you." She turned and walked back to the door, where Margaret was waiting. As they left, Emma did something she hadn't done in months. She turned in her seat and watched Rosa leave. Actually watched, with something that almost looked like curiosity in her eyes. When Rosa returned to Victoria's office, the billionaire was on a phone call, pacing by the windows. She held up one finger, "Wait," and continued talking. "I don't care what the contractor says. If we're over budget, he finds a way to cut costs without cutting quality. That's what I'm paying him for. Handle it." She ended the call and turned to Rosa. "Well, she's a lovely child," Rosa said simply. "She didn't react to you." "She did, just not the way you might notice." Victoria frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means she listened, she looked, and she nodded when I spoke to her. That's more connection than you might think." Victoria stared at her, trying to decide if this woman was delusional or perceptive. "I'll need to think about this." "Of course." Rosa picked up her purse. "May I ask you something before I go?" Victoria tensed. "What?" "When was the last time you sat with your daughter? Just sat. No agenda, no therapy, no trying to fix anything, just being together." The question landed like a physical blow. Victoria's face went cold. "That's none of your business." "You're right," Rosa said gently. "I apologize. But if you hire me, Ms. Ashford, you should know. I don't just care for the child. I care for the whole family. And right now, both of you are hurting." "Get out," Victoria said quietly. Rosa nodded and left without another word. Victoria stood alone in her office, shaking with rage and something else she couldn't name. How dare that woman? How dare she presume to understand anything about their situation? But that night, reviewing the security footage, Victoria watched the 5 minutes Rosa had spent in Emma's room. Watched how Rosa didn't rush, didn't perform, didn't try too hard. Watched how Emma turned to look at her, how Emma's body language shifted from closed to slightly open, watched how, after Rosa left, Emma picked up her sketchbook and drew something. Victoria zoomed in on the footage, enhancing the image. It was a drawing of a woman with a kind face and a small gold cross necklace, and underneath, in Emma's careful printing, she was nice. Victoria stared at those 3 words for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and called Margaret. "Hire her," she said. "Rosa starts Monday." If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Rosa moved into the penthouse on a gray Monday morning in late October. She arrived with 1 suitcase and a canvas bag filled with things Victoria couldn't identify from the security footage. Books, yarn, something wrapped in cloth. Margaret showed her to the 3rd floor room, small but comfortable, with its own bathroom and a window facing east. Rosa unpacked slowly, carefully. She placed a framed photograph on the nightstand, a man with kind eyes and a weathered face. Her late husband, Victoria assumed. Beside it, she set a small wooden cross and a worn Spanish Bible. Then she went downstairs to meet Emma for breakfast. The first week was quiet. Rosa followed the routine exactly as Victoria had outlined. She woke Emma gently at 7, helped her dress, made simple breakfasts, scrambled eggs, toast, fruit. She packed lunches with notes tucked inside. Not words of encouragement or motivation, just small drawings, a heart, a flower, a smiley face. Emma never responded, but she kept the notes. After school, Rosa would sit with Emma while she did homework. She didn't hover, didn't pressure. She'd simply be there, knitting or reading, occasionally offering help when Emma looked stuck. In the evenings, they'd have dinner together at the kitchen table, never the formal dining room. Rosa would talk softly about her day, about the birds she'd seen outside, about memories of her own children. Emma never spoke, but she listened. Victoria watched it all on the cameras. Every morning before work, every night before bed, she'd scroll through the footage, looking for, what? Proof that Rosa was like the others? Evidence of negligence or cruelty or exploitation? But there was nothing, just patience, just quiet, steady presence. And slowly, something began to shift. By week 2, Emma started sitting closer to Rosa during homework time. By week 3, she began helping with simple dinner preparations, washing vegetables, setting the table, small things, but things she hadn't done in years. Then, on a rainy Thursday evening in November, Rosa did something different. Victoria was in her office, half watching the security feed while answering emails, when she heard it. Through the cameras, through the speakers, singing. Rosa was in the kitchen washing dishes, humming softly. Then words, gentle and lilting in Spanish, a lullaby. Victoria's hands froze on the keyboard. That song. She knew that song. Isabel used to sing it every night, rocking Emma to sleep. It was a Mexican lullaby Isabel had learned from a coworker years ago. Duerme, duerme, negrito. Sleep, sleep, little one. She'd sing it in her imperfect Spanish, her voice warm and slightly off-key, and Emma would smile and drift off, safe in her mother's arms. Victoria hadn't heard that song in 5 years. On the screen, Emma had gone completely still. She was sitting at the kitchen table, coloring, but her crayon had stopped moving. Her whole body was rigid, listening. Rosa continued singing, her voice soft but clear, as if she didn't notice anything unusual. She was just washing dishes, just singing to herself, lost in the melody. And then it happened. Emma's mouth opened, her lips moved, forming a single word. So quiet the camera barely picked it up. "Mama." Victoria's breath stopped. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She turned the volume up, her hands shaking. Rosa had stopped singing. She'd heard it too. She turned slowly from the sink, her wet hands gripping the counter. Emma was staring at her, tears streaming down her face, and her mouth was moving again. Mama used to sing that. Her voice was rough, unused, like something rusted finally breaking free, but it was real. It was her voice. Rosa moved carefully, slowly, like approaching a frightened bird. She knelt down beside Emma's chair. "She did?" Rosa asked softly. Emma nodded, tears falling faster now. "Every night, before she—" Her voice broke. "Before she left." "Oh, sweetheart." Rosa opened her arms, and Emma collapsed into them, sobbing, actually sobbing, 5 years of grief pouring out in raw, broken sounds. Victoria sat frozen at her desk, watching through the camera, her own tears blurring the screen. Her daughter was speaking. After 5 years of silence, after $500,000 in specialists, after every expert said to give her time and space and professional intervention, it was a 71-year-old woman singing a lullaby that broke through. She grabbed her keys and ran. Victoria burst through the penthouse door 15 minutes later, her heart pounding. She'd left work in the middle of a meeting, hadn't even grabbed her coat, just ran to the car and drove like her life depended on it. The kitchen was quiet when she arrived. Rosa was still holding Emma, rocking her gently, murmuring soft words in Spanish and English. Emma's face was buried in Rosa's shoulder, her small body shaking with sobs. Victoria stood in the doorway, breathless, terrified to speak, terrified to break whatever fragile thing had just been born. Rosa looked up. Their eyes met. "She spoke," Victoria whispered. "She did," Rosa said gently. Emma pulled back from Rosa's shoulder, her face red and wet. She turned and saw her mother standing there, and for the first time in 5 years, she spoke to her. "Mama's song," Emma said, her voice hoarse. "She sang Mama's song." Victoria's legs nearly gave out. She walked forward on shaking knees and dropped down beside them, her expensive suit hitting the kitchen floor. "Emma, oh, Emma." "I miss her," Emma cried. "I miss Mama so much." "I know, baby, I know." Victoria reached out, and Emma let her mother pull her close, hold her, and they cried together, really cried. The tears Victoria had held back for 5 years, the grief she'd buried under work and walls and surveillance cameras, it all came pouring out. Rosa quietly stood and stepped back, giving them space. But Emma grabbed her hand. "Don't go," Emma said. "Please don't go." Rosa squeezed her hand gently. "I'm right here, mija. I'm not going anywhere." They stayed like that, the three of them on the kitchen floor, until Emma's sobs quieted into hiccups, until Victoria's tears slowed, until the worst of the storm had passed. Finally, Emma pulled back and looked at her mother, really looked at her like she was seeing her for the first time in years. "Where did you go?" Emma asked softly. Victoria's throat tightened. "What do you mean?" "After Mama died, you went away, you stopped being here." The words were a knife through Victoria's chest. "I'm here every day, sweetheart. I live here." "But you're not here," Emma said, with the devastating clarity only children possess. "You watch me on the cameras, but you don't sit with me. You don't see me." Victoria couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, because her 7-year-old daughter had just spoken the truth she'd been hiding from. Rosa knelt down again, her voice gentle. "Your mama has been hurting too, Emma. Sometimes grown-ups forget how to feel things because it hurts too much. They hide, even from the people they love most." Emma looked at Victoria, her eyes, Isabel's eyes, full of questions. "Do you still love me?" "Oh, God." Victoria pulled her close again, holding on like Emma might disappear. "Yes, yes, baby, more than anything in the world. I never stopped. I didn't know how to show you. I was so scared of losing you too, scared of feeling anything because it all hurt so much. But I'm still here," Emma whispered. I've been here the whole time." "I know," Victoria said, her voice breaking. "I know you have, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." They held each other until Emma finally pulled back, exhausted. Rosa helped her stand, and together they walked Emma to her room. The little girl was asleep before her head hit the pillow, wrung out from emotion. Victoria sat on the edge of the bed watching her daughter breathe, her hand resting on Emma's small back. Rosa stood near the door, ready to leave them alone. "Don't," Victoria said quietly. "Please stay." Rosa stepped back into the room. "How did you know?" Victoria asked, her voice barely a whisper. "How did you know to sing that song?" "I didn't," Rosa admitted. "It's just a song my mother sang to me, a song I sang to my children. I had no idea." "It was Isabel's song." Victoria's voice cracked. "She sang it every night. I'd forgotten. I'd buried it so deep I'd forgotten." "Memory lives in music," Rosa said softly. "Sometimes it comes back when we need it most." Victoria was quiet for a long moment, watching Emma sleep. Then she spoke, her voice thick with shame. "I've been a terrible mother." "No," Rosa said firmly. "You've been a grieving mother. That's different." "I abandoned her, hid behind work and cameras, and—" "You survived," Rosa interrupted gently. "You survived the worst thing that can happen to a person. You lost your wife. You thought you were losing your daughter. You did what you had to do to keep breathing." She paused. "But now it's time to live again. For her, for yourself." Victoria looked up at Rosa, this woman she'd hired less than a month ago, and felt something crack open inside her chest. "I don't know how." "Yes, you do," Rosa said. "You just showed her. You dropped everything and came home. You got on the floor with her. You held her. You told her the truth. That's how." "What if I fail? What if I can't?" "You will fail sometimes," Rosa said simply. "That's part of being human, part of being a parent. But failing is different than hiding, and you're not hiding anymore." Victoria nodded, tears sliding down her face again. "Will you help us? Not as an employee, as family?" Rosa smiled, her eyes shining. "I already am family, mija. From the moment Emma nodded at me in that window seat, I was family." 3 months later. The penthouse still had 73 rooms, but Victoria only used about 20 of them now. The rest sat quiet, waiting, because Victoria wasn't working 18-hour days anymore. She came home at 5:30, had dinner with Emma and Rosa at the kitchen table, never the dining room. They'd talk about their days, about small things, about nothing and everything. Emma spoke more now, not constantly. She still had quiet days, days when words felt too heavy. But when she needed to speak, she could. Her voice was soft but growing stronger. Victoria had taken down half the cameras, kept a few for security, but stopped reviewing the footage obsessively, stopped hiding behind screens, started showing up in person, for bedtime stories, for homework help, for Saturday morning pancakes that she still somehow burned even though Rosa wrote down the recipe. One evening in February, as snow fell outside the windows, Rosa was teaching Emma to knit. Victoria sat beside them on the couch, her laptop closed for once, just watching. Emma held up her lumpy, uneven scarf attempt. "It's terrible," she said, but she was smiling. "It's perfect," Rosa said. "First ones always are." "That doesn't make sense," Emma laughed. "Perfect doesn't mean flawless, mija. It means made with love." Emma thought about that, then looked at Victoria. "Mom, do you remember when Mama taught me to braid?" Victoria's breath caught. Emma rarely talked about Isabel directly. "I do. You were 4. You kept getting frustrated because your fingers were too small." She told me the same thing Rosa just said, that it didn't have to be perfect. It just had to be made with love. Emma paused. "I think Mama would like Rosa." Victoria's eyes filled. "I think she'd love her." "Me too." Emma leaned against Rosa, and Rosa wrapped an arm around her. Victoria reached over and took both their hands, completing the circle. "Thank you," she said to Rosa. "For what?" "For singing, for seeing her, for teaching me how to be here again." Rosa squeezed her hand. "You taught yourself, mija. I just reminded you." That night, after Emma was asleep, Victoria stood in the hallway outside her daughter's room. She could hear Rosa inside, singing softly. That lullaby. Isabel's lullaby. But this time Victoria didn't cry. She smiled, because her daughter's voice had come back. And somewhere along the way, so had hers. Grace doesn't arrive in boardrooms or corner offices. It doesn't come from specialists or certificates or six-figure treatments. Sometimes it arrives in a 71-year-old woman with worn hands and a heart too big to measure. Sometimes it sounds like a lullaby sung in imperfect Spanish. Sometimes it looks like patience and presence and love that asks for nothing in return. And sometimes the miracle isn't fixing what's broken. It's learning to live again with the cracks still showing. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.